Without further delay, please allow me to welcome the very distinguished and renowned speaker of tonight, SV Varadarajan. SV is a seasoned analytics consulting professional and has held various data and analytics leadership roles over the years. He is currently the VP in data analytics function of HSBC. He has deep experience in applying analytics across various functions like operations, procurement, sales, marketing, etc., and has been responsible for driving large-scale data and analytics initiatives. SV is passionate about education initiatives and actively volunteers with NGOs across the country supporting educational and financial literacy initiatives. A very warm welcome to you, SV. We are thrilled to have you here with us tonight. Handing the session over to you.
Thank you, Shama. Thank you so much for your warm and kind introduction. And I hope you can hear me well.
Yes, we can hear you and see you.
Okay, perfect. Thank you all. Welcome everyone today. I would probably take about 30 to 40 minutes odd in terms of what we have to kind of quickly brief you through the presentation, and then obviously we'll spend a little more time, about 15-20 minutes or even more if we can, on Q&As, because I think that's where probably the engagement works better. But before getting started, and I think I'll anyways bring up my screen, but before getting started, I would just like to understand the experience profile of the audience today. So Shama, would you quickly mind bringing up the poll for the experience profile?
Yes, I hope everybody can see the poll. Let us know the years of experience you have, and also if you feel like sharing your current profile with us, please drop comments in the chat window. So SV, we have a very mixed crowd here, so I don't know how you're going to align your talk, but we had 5 years, 33%, and about 17% to 5 to 10 years. I'll just quickly share the results.
Okay.
Yeah,
that's not bad. I think it's a good mixed bag. Less than 10 years, 50%, and greater than 10 years, 50%. So that's fine. I think just to get an idea. All right. So the topic today, I think, is building data products. And I think I firstly would like to congratulate the Institute of Product Leadership, in fact, to take this initiative to run data awareness or data literacy sessions more for the broader audience. And this is something, I guess, every institute, every organization these days is considering. That's because the vast importance of data has become so critical for organizations and academic institutions alike. I'll kind of start with a question first. If we were to review some of the pictures that you see here, can anyone tell which of the below that you see is not a data product? So the one on the left side is actually a nuclear reactor facility. So these are pretty much the controls. It's a little dated. It looks a little old, but these days the nuclear reactors probably look even more sophisticated or complicated. So this is the nuclear reactor. Here is a robot that handles parcels.
SV, I'm so sorry to interrupt, but we are still on the first slide.
I'm so sorry. Just a second. Can you see this?
Yes, we can see it now.
Okay. Thank you, Shama. Thanks for letting me know. Yeah, so I was saying the one on the left is a nuclear reactor facility, and like the picture you can see from the color, it's not a color, it's actually really the black and white. I couldn't really get a latest one. The one here you see is a package handling robot. I'm sure anyone who has visited Amazon fulfillment centers or DHL or FedEx warehouses would have seen something like this. Obviously, these are some of the apps that we see every day, every hour on our mobiles. It is an image of a satellite, and this is probably what we recognize as a dashboard. So just wanted to understand, are there any guesses in terms of what you think here is potentially not a data product?
Folks, feel free to post your comments and your thoughts in the chat window to make this session interactive.
Yeah, if I'll just wait for a few seconds.
We'll wait for a few more seconds and we'll continue.
Yeah. Okay. I can see one response, first one. Okay, that's Yash. All right, Yash. We'll come to that. Let's just see if there is anyone who has.
In the chat window, Pawan says all our data products.
Perfect. That's right, Pawan. All of these use data intensively. All of these pretty much need data to run. If you don't have data, you can as well say that, it can have the power, it can have the lights, it can have the electricity, it can have all the kind of, connections, but without the right data, none of these products that you see in this screen work. So absolutely true. The only reason why I wanted to show you is a general sense, or a generic sense, is that a data product is typically, where you see mostly like a dashboard or something like that. That's what people usually relate to data product. For a good majority, that is true. And in fact, I think for the vast majority, if we are thinking about those AI, machine learning, and data science books, I think that's absolutely true. But the fact is that data products don't just stop with, say, a dashboard like this, but services like this, Google, Gmail, all of these, or robots like this, satellites, and these kind of, rocket launching facilities or nuclear reactors, all of these are absolutely dependent on data. Data is pretty critical for each of these. Okay, so hopefully that gives everyone a good idea of the vast gamut of data products and what it can be. But then obviously we may not cover everything into this, because I don't think in terms of the scope, we certainly don't think we can cover either rocket launching facilities or nuclear power plants. We'll stick to the data products that we standard generally know as dashboards, or anything which are more like data services. It could be a big service, or it could be a microservice. And why data product management? I think when Shama was actually asking me about, let's do some sessions on data, and for the product managers, because it's an institute that teaches a course on product management, I was really surprised and kind of, delighted to see that, okay, there are folks who wanted to also understand data with a product management perspective. And just reading out a quote from IDC, which is International Data Corporation, and it's an analyst firm that tracks pretty much the entire hardware, software, services, everything with respect to IT. It's one of the world's foremost institutions, which most of the corporations use their numbers or use their reports to take actual market facts. So it says, IDC states that at least half of the global GDP will be digitized by 2021. This is a 2019 report. As the report explains, while most of the organizations are attempting digital transformation, only a small percentage are getting it right. Obviously, I have shared the slide with Shama with the link to the report. So if someone wants, they can just go and view the report if you have access. But then the fact is that most organizations are attempting digital transformation, but only a small percentage is getting it right. And to give you an idea of what that small percentage is, it's less than 10% in some of the cases. And COVID, as most of you know, and some of you might have even seen the memes, right? COVID has accelerated digital transformation. And in that kind of a scenario, if you have people who don't have the right kind of skills or the right kind of capabilities to drive this kind of digital transformation within the organization, I think that's where we are seeing a vast majority of failures that we could potentially look at. And at this point of time, Shama, can I quickly request you to put that poll about the users' experience with the data products? How many of them here have worked on any type of data product?
Sure, I'll do that.
While I have said it's in your current role, it doesn't necessarily mean in your current role. If you had any type of experience, even in your past roles, if you managed it, would like to certainly understand. All right. So we have 20% saying yes and 80% saying no. Okay, that is a really good audience then. I think that's how in industry currently it is, because data or technology are mostly seen as solutions. They are rarely seen as products. But the reason why most of the technology or most of the solutions that you see, data solutions you see, are so limited to only technical folks or only the data science or data analytics folks, is because it is not evangelized with the way like a product is done. Just imagine Gmail, right? Or just imagine your Google. The way the product is evangelized is making it accessible for everyone. But obviously, I don't think people see the same thing of any machine learning or a data science or a dashboard model in the same lens. A quick view of what's really driving the data products, or what's really driving this AI and data science more into the product mold. The first one is data economy. And what I mean by data economy is that if you look at the top 5 organizations in the world today, whether you see the Fortune 100 or Fortune 500, the top 5 are Apple, Amazon, Alphabet, Microsoft, and Meta, which is the revamped version of Facebook. So these are the top 5 organizations. If you look at their combined quarterly profits, it's somewhere in the ballpark range of 55 to 70 billion dollars. And if you look at the next 15 Fortune 500 or Fortune 100 or even Fortune 50 companies, their quarterly profits don't even add up to 50 billion. Probably the first 5 quarterly profits is greater than the next 5 annual profits. And why is that so? The only reason is because these organizations that we just spoke, I think we all recognize none of these are producing anything, right? They don't produce any products. Well, of course, Apple produces hardware. Google has, or Amazon has small devices like Alexa and other things. Echo. It isn't their primary revenue. It's a software, it's a services, it's the licenses, which is where all these companies make a lot of money. Barring probably Apple could be the only exception there, because it makes a good amount of money even on the devices. But all of the other vendors like Microsoft, like Alphabet, like Amazon, all of them are pretty much making money through their data services. And that shows where the world economy is going. It's not just for America, right? If you look at China, Baidu, which is an equivalent of Google, or a lot of companies that Tencent owns, a lot of gaming companies, or if you have to look at Alibaba, which is an equivalent of your Amazon or eBay type of a thing for China. Again, all of these organizations make a lot of money using users' data. You and me, we are the users. We are the ones whose profiles, whose data, whose kind of micro targeted profiles are being created by these organizations to drive the data economy. Then comes the data privacy and governance. And why am I really highlighting on this? Not many of you know, probably, but there is a huge amount of data privacy violations that occur. And maybe one of the most famous one is Cambridge Analytica. If most of you would have seen that with Facebook, there was a big issue with respect to how the Facebook users' data was used for manipulating or influencing American polls. But that is one of the tip of the iceberg, I would probably say. There are tons and tons of ways in which organizations actually try and violate data privacy or data governance. And that's exactly where it leads to the next topic of data monetization. There are organizations that build profiles around the data that you generate and then sell your data for organizations that see those profiles useful. So they can say, here is so for example, a typical user profile or a persona could be something like this, right? If you look at Facebook, basis the way you tag the places that you visit, basis the type of photos that you load, basis the kind of people that you meet. And Facebook, you don't really even have to tag people. The moment you load a photo, Facebook has enough algorithms to really identify with whom you have been and what is the person, what the person does, and then tracks that person from the person's network, Facebook network. So it really can tell, here is a person, male, female, in their 30s, 40s, whatever, working, or a businessman or an academician, traveling across the world or traveling across the country, or someone who likes partying, or someone who likes maybe attending social events, or someone who likes to spend time with their friends, etc. Now just imagine how beneficial can that be if it has to be sold to a travel company, say like a Make My Trip or a Clear Trip, or anybody who wants to kind of offer travel services. It is not at all very difficult, right? Yeah, they may not specifically say, here is a person A, he's interested to kind of maybe he travels around the world 5 times in a year, or around the country 20 times in a year, something like that. But they can say, here are the list of people who in their respective countries have a very high propensity to travel. And that type of data monetization, for that type of thing, companies pay a ton of money to organizations like Facebook, to organizations like Twitter, to Amazon does the same thing. And that's how Amazon tells you what you should buy or what products people like you are interested. So that data monetization, using your data, you being sold products or services, and companies make money. And here is where a lot of governments are bringing in regulations that if a company is using my data to monetize or create services, I should be equally compensated. And which is where there are services that you today, whenever you log into any website, you have to explicitly accept the cookies. This is as part of the GDPR, the General Data Protection Regulations that went live in Europe about 4 years back. So that's the way in which governments are now slowly trying to kind of bring regulations into this. Obviously, of course, yes, there is always a question in terms of whether you want regulation or whether you want innovation. Because if you bring regulation, innovation can stifle, and if you let innovation go unchallenged, there can be a lot of downside effects too. So that's where that's an interesting topic. It's an interesting debate that's happening across academia and industries across the world. And in fact, governments are aggressively and actively participating in that debate. Data sovereignty, I think, again, that topic of regulations leads us to the data sovereignty. This is where countries are deciding what data goes outside the country, what data stays inside the country. India itself had very recently passed a data privacy bill. China had something like this long ago. I think Europe has a framework. While I wouldn't say they have a law or they have a regulation, Europe has a framework. That is what is called as GDPR. There are countries that have adopted that regulation in various degrees. There are some countries like Swiss and others who have adapted it to the highest level. And then there are some countries like Spain and others who have slightly diluted it and adopted it basis their requirements. But then data sovereignty is something that's really coming in a big way in the last few years. So that shows how the data economy, right? It's not just economy. We started with Google, Alphabet, Amazon, companies like that. So it's not those big companies that are interested in your data. It's your government. It's something your government agencies. Your income tax department is obviously very interested in data. I'm sure all of you know that, right? So these are some of the examples, I think, that really can be shown as how data is defining or driving the new economy. And about 4 or 5 years back, Economist, I'm sure you would all have heard about the magazine name, one of the world's renowned publications, actually named data as the new oil. It said that just like oil created wealth for a large part of 20th century, data and the organizations or countries that harness this data and harvest this data in an effective manner are going to create wealth for their shareholders or citizens in the 21st century. And that's what all the fight is about today. So are there any questions? Yeah.
Yes,
I
there is
can
one
see.
question in the Q&A. Do you want to take it now?
Yeah, if there is anything specific to this, I'll certainly answer
Yes.
it and move on.
So this is from Prashant. He says every country changes their policy guidelines over data. How to
Yeah.
tackle this change as a product manager?
Yes, very interesting question, Prashant, and I can absolutely relate with that challenge because I work in a bank, and unfortunately for a bank like HSBC that operates in over 50 countries, we need to kind of, manage regulations for 50 different central banking regulators. So just like we have in India, RBI, you have Federal Reserve in US, you have Financial Services Commission in UK, and a lot of such. You have Monetary Authority of Singapore or Monetary Authority of Hong Kong in countries like Singapore and Hong Kong. I think the way organizations are trying to do is there is a global standard they create, which means take in all the regulations, all the rules, and try to see what is the most stringent of that. Obviously, the benefit of that is if you take the most stringent of that and adopt to it, you will be much more safer even in countries which are less stringent today, but eventually the rules may adopt or evolve over a period of time. But what might not happen is that you will not get full benefits of your data, and hence there is a risk that you will lose out creating some features or creating some services for your audience in those countries with less dependency, which is exactly where I would come to that point a little later, but there are a lot of interesting roles that are created in the data economy. Earlier, it used to be analytics consultant or a data visualization or a data science or a statistician. But then there are a lot of roles that are today created in the data world for data privacy specialist, or data governance specialist. And these roles are primarily involved in tackling these challenges. The role of a data governance or a data privacy person is to understand regulations, is to define what data points are accessible for what countries or what markets and not accessible. In fact, what data you can collect in which countries and what data you can't collect in which countries. Define those regulations and implement those regulations. So that's how that happens. And a product manager needs to really work with those kind of teams in an organization. And if those kind of teams are not there, at least create a list of must know data regulations for your core markets so that you don't go wrong in terms of when you deploy your services. Because if you don't understand the regulations when you're building and you deploy something, and then that happens contrary to market regulation, the organization ends up paying huge penalties. And I'm sure all of us have heard or seen about these kind of penalties that are levied. I mean, you will see Microsoft, Google, Amazon, all of them paying hundreds of millions of dollars in penalties to European unions, to America itself, where they work. In China, obviously, yes, there is a huge amount of data privacy, and these companies have been penalized. In fact, some of them have actually moved out of China. Companies like Google have decided to move out of China, both for the stringent regulation they put and also the censorship. So that's the way that works with respect to regulations. All right, quickly, I'm sure most of you might understand this, but intuitively, if I were to kind of, explain this, first you understand, before building a data product, first you understand what your product is and what your product does. So conceptualize the product, get an understanding of who your customers are, why you are building this product, what is the impact or what is the need to build this product. The second one is then figure out what data to acquire. Obviously, you can acquire internal data, you can acquire external data. External data, on a lot of times, external data can actually enhance or improve your data products, whereas internal data is only restricted to organization. External data can bring in a lot of market and competitive forces. While internal data can make your models more accurate, external data can make your models more broad-based. So that's where the significant difference is. Refinement, any data, all of you know and have heard about it, is garbage in, garbage out, right? So if you don't refine the data, if you don't make it fit for purpose, you send it as you get it, then you don't really get what you expect to see. Storage and retrieval, again, there are regulatory aspects of it, there are technology aspects of it, so both needs to be considered into account. Distribution, this is how you intend to, whether through the dashboards, which is what talks about presentation, or by using the data and creating microservices around the data. So you'll need to figure out which way you're going to do that. And then once you have either a data service or a data product deployed, you obviously need to seek the feedback from your stakeholders or your end customers. A lot of times the stakeholders for AI or ML analysts or data science analysts could be internal stakeholders. They could be the ones who are your companies, senior executives or senior management for whom you're building these kind of products. And in other cases, it could be your customers of the business. So for example, and if you were to consider an Amazon, right? And Amazon can build a user recommendation system with slight tweaks. In one page, they can give model A of user recommendation. In another similar page, they can do model B of a user recommendation. And they can decide in Bangalore, where I stay, East Bangalore will get this page, whereas South Bangalore will get this page. And then this type of testing is typically called as A/B testing, where they can do micro profile or microservice testing across two different set of clustered audience and see how the behavior works. So that is always something that you need to get, whether it is internal, but whether it is external, you need to always understand how your data product performs. A similar thing, if you were to look at it from an AI or ML, from the product management context, is that there are four things that, if you look at it, come here as Venn diagrams, and then obviously the center of the intersection of all of that is the data product management. There is this data science field, which is all about data skills and data capabilities. So that's data science. Obviously, it's not just about data, it's about statistics, it's about programming, all of that. And then comes user experience, right? So user experience means understanding what my user wants. It's not just about visual interface. User experience doesn't mean just seeing the product and feeling how it is, but also when the user goes through the journey should be seamless. When the product is used or the service is used, the journey should be seamless. And then feasibility, which is basically in terms of, if it is a large data service, you obviously need something like a cloud to deploy. If it is a small data service, you can always deploy on-prem. Obviously, the infrastructure, IT infrastructure, or the technology constraints can always determine how quickly you can scale up or how broadly your services can grow. And then the product management, which is what creates a way of sustainability in terms of getting the visibility of the product, getting the kind of connect with the audience, and making sure the right training, the right awareness is built. So for all of that, obviously you'll need to do the product management or the project management rigor. So when you kind of mix all of that, the center intersection area that you see across these four Venn circles is that's the kind of gist of data product management. So if you do all of this, that's when you can say that yes, here is the sweet spot for data product management. Something for those who have been more closely involved on IT projects or the data projects can certainly relate to this. A large number of data, AI, or ML projects remain stuck at the POC level, proof of concept level. Some of them slow down beyond the project stage, which is just the development stage. And 80 to 90% of them fail before they go into full adoption, because rarely people spend the amount of time in advocating the products, evangelizing the products, and socializing the products as much as they spend time in building the products. The technical efforts far outweigh the marketing efforts, if I were to say in simpler terms, marketing your data product. So that's what I would suggest. And then The key reason, as I said here, is the lack of AI product mindset. A user cares, if you were to look from a user's perspective, a user cares whether his problem is solved or whether the business challenge that he is working against is resolved, rather than whether you built it with a specific machine learning model A or a model B or a model C, right? Or your model has a 80% accuracy or a 90% accuracy or 100% accuracy. They don't care about the model technicalities or the model flavors. They care about real business problems. And unfortunately, a majority of what we are seeing today still in the AI/ML or the data science fields are more oriented towards technicalities, but less oriented towards the actual product application or product utilization for the business. I think we are at a logical this thing. And in fact, here is where, Shama, I would probably want to get you the other question. If where people have seen or experienced or seen data projects or technology projects failing after the launch. So the intent to understand is that in your professional sphere, have you seen technology projects or data projects or even applications that were launched with great fanfare and with a lot of marketing and bells and whistles, only to realize that 2 years later, 3 years later, people don't even know that that exists and that died down? And if so, how many of you have seen that?
While they answer the poll, there is a question related to what you were saying, SV, if we can take that. I'm not sure who it's coming from, but the question is, considering how users are now far more understanding about their privacy, if devices such as iPhones gives users the options whether to allow apps to track or not, how does that affect this massive data seeking companies?
Yeah. So I think that's a fair question. What the companies do in the backend is still a black box, honestly. I think even within the organizations, very few people really know what actually happens. But yes, the explicit way of using the data and kind of, in some ways, I would probably even go to the extent of saying slightly responsible ways in which companies blatantly kind of violate the user privacy norms and go ahead and use it. I think that's what is going to reduce, but it's not that, because unfortunately all these companies need those data services or those data insights to really provide you services. So without that they can't, and hence it may be that while they may track it, they may still not store it, or they may not process it, or they may try to kind of take a metadata or a characteristic out of it and not assign that to a specific user. So yeah, and then I do see, okay, we do have this, okay, an interesting 80% of people say they have seen such initiatives failing and 20% say no. Okay, I am really glad there are 20% of the people who have actually seen those initiatives succeed. In my lifespan or in my professional career life, any data product which did not have a great management buy-in or a great employee buy-in, or if it is for external facing customers, if it didn't have customer buy-in, actually failed, whether it's a data product or a technology product. So yes, we do see a vast majority actually relating to that. There is a question which says, what is the right team combination for data product manager? Excel, is it a BA or legal team or continents, countries, or both are must? I am not quite sure if I understand the question, Prashant. Is there a way you can unmute yourself and ask that question?
Prashant, you can raise your hand and I can unmute you. You can go ahead and ask your question now.
Hey, hi. So my question was more related, let's say a lot of time where earlier when we were working very closely with BAs to really succeed in product management. But now within data product management, do we need because as you mentioned, the policies for each individual countries changes or continent-wide. So
Yeah.
now having legal team along with BAs or only BA or legal team, or what is the right combination to really succeed as a data product management?
Yeah, see, if you are looking at a data product for internal organization, Prashant, I don't think you really need legal team, because most of the organizations do understand these regulations, and uh, today most of the large organizations actually have some level of governance around it. But if you're looking at a data product for external audience, right, and if you are intending to launch it cross markets, cross geography, especially across continents, because we still see some level of fungibility within the data rules, at least say within Europe block or the Americas block. But when you move across blocks, right, that's where I think the challenge comes in. So yes, in that case, you are better off getting a legal opinion. But typically in most of the organizations, a lot of these things are taken by someone known as risk stewards, and these are the people who typically look at risk, whether it is a materiality risk or a non-materiality risk that can happen due to a data privacy violation or a user privacy violation or a inappropriate usage of data, or using data for a purpose which you have not mentioned while you collected it, but eventually the organization ended up using and somebody figured it out, and then they go ahead and raise a kind of court case against the organization, they sue the organization. So those are the things that typically needs to be there, and that's where yes, it makes sense to have some risk stewards direct or guide when we are doing a multi-country launch. And typically organizations like Facebook, Amazon, Google, if you look at it, they don't launch a new feature at the same time across the world. They always launch first in a market, and that too for a select audience as a test. They do an A/B testing, they figure out how the feature gets. They constantly do that. In fact, a lot of times you don't even see Google telling you that they are doing some testing, or Facebook telling you that they are doing some testing, right? Or Amazon telling you that. You, without even knowing, you suddenly see a slight different change of a Google email interface. You suddenly see a little different Facebook app or a Facebook prompt. You suddenly see a Amazon page that comes in a different way or gives you a different feature to compare prices or something like that. So all of these are feature testings that's continuously happening in the background. And depending on how the feature is successful, companies launch, and they don't launch it at any given point of time across markets, because there is a huge risk of failure also. It's not just the legal or a regulation aspect, it's also the product scalability or a feature scalability aspect.
Okay, okay. I have multiple questions around it, but I think I don't want to consume a lot of time. I'll email
We'll
you or
surely take
send
them
you
towards the
separate.
end as well,
Yeah,
Prashant.
yeah, correct,
Please stay on.
correct,
Yeah.
correct.
Yeah. So I think the key thing, which I would say for this lack of success, 80% of you have said that you have seen those things fail. The key things, the reasons why these things don't succeed. And here are the three things that I would call as missing link. One is focus. Data products or technology products need to be seen as products. And most of the times they are seen as projects or solutions. There is a different mindset when you go in a project or a solution versus when you actually see it as a product, because product managers always consider user requirements and marketing appropriate features of the product aligned to user requirements, which most of the solution architects or solution specialists rarely do. The life cycle, which is just like you have a product manager who takes care of a product life cycle, any technology product or a data product goes through the same life cycle evolution. And if you don't evolve, or if you don't go through that evolution of the life cycle, the product soon becomes stale and hence becomes dysfunctional. And the third one is you need to measure success, right? If you launch a product today in the market, if you launch for anything, right? Let's say you come up with a mobile device or you come up with a gaming device. Your success is how many customers are interested, what kind of sales are you making, what kind of footfalls are you seeing, all of that. If you don't find success with the product for 3 months, 6 months, you don't keep burning cash manufacturing the product and keeping that in stores and stocking your inventory, right? You quickly take a call that, okay, this product is not successful, let me kill it and then let me go with a different one. The same thing applies for digital products. Unfortunately, because the cost of maintaining a digital product is much lesser than cost of maintaining a physical product, even though if it is a failure, a lot of people consider digital products with less stringent view. But I think that lenient view will end up creating a bad marketing or a negative publicity for your other data products or other technology products, because people will think that, okay, last one didn't work well, this isn't going to be great. A bit of detail in terms of what we have seen, but I think a lot of these things are self-explanatory. So obviously, yes, identify the opportunity, build the products, evaluate and iterate. And these are some of the steps that I would say typically organizations which are successful in launching the data products and scaling up the data products. And when I say these are the organizations like the Googles and the Facebooks of the world, this is how they typically do it. It's always small iterations, small improvements, and continuous release, continuous testing, continuous development, continuous release. So that is the standard way in which most of the organizations run. And while we have learned that obviously as a skill, looking data as a product or looking data services and solutions as a product helps, but we do see that this is a capability or this is a skill that's significantly less in the industry today. And most of the organizations prefer to upskill their employees, want to kind of upskill their employees through a lot of internal training programs. Obviously, over 50% of the organizations surveyed by McKinsey, this is a 2021 survey, I think, where senior managers were asked how you're looking to address the talent gaps. Over 50% say that they wanted to build the skills for their existing employees. They wanted to invest in them. Whereas the remaining, the half of them say that they wanted to go with external hiring, and the other half say that they wanted to redeploy people. So either they move people from one domain to other domain where they pick up the skills, and or they get into domains where they are more comfortable with their existing skills and capabilities. But yes, the skill augmentation is seen pretty seriously within the organizations, and that's something I'm sure all of you would have also seen your organizations in the last couple of years with COVID setting in, and a lot of physical training that used to be available for organizations going away. A lot of digital, a lot of online training platforms have opened up, and that has really given an opportunity to develop multitude of skills. And this is one thing I keep seeing in a lot of professional networks like LinkedIn, where people keep posting that I completed this certification, I have finished these courses, I'm kind of enrolled in these courses. So that's a trend that is very visible in the last 2 years. So in some ways, yes, COVID accelerated the digital transformation, as some of us would have seen those memes. But for that digital transformation to be successful, we will need the right set of skills and the right kind of mindset. So I think one of you asked in terms of what kind of team should be there. So typically for a data product, these are the standard team roles within the function. Usually, yes, there is a product manager who should be responsible for overall function of the product and overall engagement with the customer. While the data product manager is responsible overall, he will have data product owner who will take the responsibility of engaging the customers and access customers' voice in the product development team. The UX designers or data visualization guys are the ones who actually design the user interface, are the ones who design the flow, the user journeys. And that's something very important, because if you don't design intuitive journeys, if you design journeys that are confusing to users, it's going to be very difficult, right? Imagine you having to open a Gmail one day and Gmail has completely changed the icons. You have composed the email and the standard send button that you usually hit on it is not there, and they have converted into some icon and they have placed it somewhere which is in a unusual place that you don't usually see it. How will you figure out that the send is replaced with that? So something like that. data scientists, obviously the ones who are more statistically and technically aware, and they are the ones who build the trends, who build the patterns and things like that. Data engineers, ML engineers, who deploy these, who make it technically feasible, who build these things technically. And DevOps are the roles which take the development and integrate into the regular operations or integrate into the standard architecture, because development happens, testing happens, end user feedback happens on a prototype, but once that is done, it needs to be incorporated into the broader business framework, whatever it is, whether it is application, whether it is a process, business process, whether it's a decision making system, but the product needs to be integrated in this. So these are the standard roles. Obviously, the product manager is responsible for ensuring that the user feedback is captured before development. Development happens against the user requirements, and once the product is deployed, the user satisfaction on the product is again reviewed to see if people are happy with whatever they have got. So that's I think largely brings to us to closure of our session today. Any questions? Yes, we have good 10, I think 9 more minutes. So if there are any questions, we can certainly go ahead and take them now.
Thank you, SV, for that brilliant session. And yes, audience, please go ahead and ask your questions in the Q&A section, or raise your hand to come live and ask a question directly to the speaker. Let's make the most of this next 8 to 10 minutes we have. Prashant, I believe you had a few more questions.
Oh yeah, if I can ask. So what I want to understand, what if any breach of data happens, and then how tackle? I'm sure probably legal team would take care of it, but how much responsible data product manager would be?
Yeah, see, I think if a legal breach happens, obviously it becomes more a legal issue. While in retrospect, it could be tracked to the product manager, or it could be tracked to a development team, it could be tracked to the business approver or the business stakeholders. It is not necessarily a product manager's fault, because a legal breach happens because not necessarily due to a design fault or a build fault, which if the case can happen or be tracked back to the product manager. But a legal breach can happen because of misuse of the product, or because of using it for something for which it was not proposed or positioned in the beginning. So it's not necessarily that every legal breach a product manager would be accountable. But again, Prashant, just to understand, is there a specific industry you are referring to? Because some it can be again industry
No,
specific.
yeah, because a lot of time I see, even when we as a consumer, when you use any product, they will just ask privacy checkbox to tick, and no one reads that, right?
No
But
one reads it.
yeah, so do we cover everything safely over there? So in case anything happens, it's just because it's a software product, we can definitely do undo or for that particular user. But whether it's still, I probably haven't come across any such a situation, but just trying to understand what happens if someone, I believe it definitely depends on company to company. Bigger
Yeah,
company, the bigger legal department and bigger gate.
yeah.
But what happens with the startups, right? Can they just get away from saying sorry, or kind of thing, saying that okay, we'll take care of it next time and done?
I wouldn't say there would be a one size fits answer for that question. The reason
Okay,
is because, first of all, it depends on how big the breach is, right? And what type of privileges of users have you breached? How many users
okay,
were impacted? What markets were this kind of? So, for example, assume something like this were to happen even in a country like US, right? US is a single country. But if it happened in California versus if it happened in New York, in California, your penalties are going to be a lot more, because California has a pretty strong data privacy act. In fact, it's called CCPA, the California Consumer Protection Act.
okay.
And a lot of data related regulations and protections for the consumer is in the act. So if it happens in Japan, right, in Asia, the penalties are going to be very stringent. On the contrary, I'll tell you an example from China, right? So I'm sure most of you know about Alibaba, and Alibaba had a company which I think it still has. It's not had a company, it still has. It's called Ant Technologies. Ant Technologies was supposed to come out with an IPO sometime towards, I guess, in the second half of 2021. But an Ant Technologies IPO, I'm not sure how many of you followed that. If it would have come, that would have been the biggest IPO in the planet. I think right now it is Saudi Aramco, which came last year again. But if Ant Technologies would have come, it would have been the biggest IPO on the planet. That was the size of Alibaba's financial technology unit. That's called Ant Technologies. The only reason that did not come out was China government was absolutely not happy with the way Alibaba was using the data. And hence, they kind of, obviously Jack Ma got really stripped of a lot of privileges from the government itself. He had to literally beg to even run his existing companies. And then in terms of things like, I think Ant is still not public. In terms of things like the scope of services that Ant does, now China had significantly clamped down in terms of the things that Ant can do. So that's an example I can share with you of how companies, if they violate rules blatantly and government kind of gets to know that, okay, here is someone who gets to know about our citizens more than a government actually gets to know, and there is a risk of an external country or a external entity potentially benefiting from it, because China banks didn't have the credit scores that Ant had about Chinese customers. China banks did not have the spending models or the buying behaviors of customers that Ant had, that Chinese retailers didn't have. So all of that. So it's an example. Those are a couple of examples I can share with you. It all depends on how big, how critical, what countries involved, what legal framework we are talking about.
Okay. No, thanks a lot
Thank
for
you,
the
Prashant, for coming forward and asking a question. And this is the last call for any other members, attendees to ask your questions. Meanwhile, okay, we have Suresh C who has raised his hand. Suresh, go ahead and ask your question.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, Suresh.
Hello, Varda. I'm Suresh. I wanted to know that what is the impact of Web3 on data products?
See, technology and data, or rather the data that drives the technology, are always interconnected. So whether you say Web3, whether you say VR, AR, whether you say device service, all of these are kind of interrelated. I think there is no individual parameter that really changes something significantly big, but these are all, I think, complementary technologies, so technologies that keep supporting each other. But if there is one technology that I really see kind of impacting data in a big way, it is your VR, AR, rather than Web 3.0 at this point of time, because Web 3 is still in a bit of a nascency stage. But whereas your AR, VR, especially with the way in terms of acquisitions have happened, I don't know if you guys have been tracking that market, and if there may be some enthusiasts here. In the last 1 year, Facebook and Apple probably acquired 100 billion worth of companies in the VR and AR space. And I'm not even talking about the Microsoft acquisition of Blizzard Activision Gaming, right, for 60 billion. I'm keeping that out. It's only AR, VR organizations that I'm speaking about. And Apple, Microsoft, Facebook, amongst the three, have actually acquired close to $100 billion worth AR, VR, patents, technologies, hirings, or acquisitions. So that is probably the bigger technology, I'll say, if you are to watch out in terms of what impacts your data products significantly, because anything that you can do today going physically, in future, you can do that sitting at your home, whether it is visiting a foreign destination, attending a foreign conference, going for a shopping in a mall, everything you can do just sitting in your couch, but getting an experience as if you are right there.
Yeah, thank you, Varadarajan.
Thank you, Suresh, for that question. Well, in view of the time constraints, we'll move on with the session, unless we have any more questions, audience. There is one question just popped up now in the Q&A window. This will probably be the last question we'll take, SV. This is from Pawan. Is it data product team role handle quality controls of building data products?
Absolutely. Absolutely. It needs to be the responsibility of the data product team. Otherwise, you end up under indexing on the build and your user satisfaction goes for a toss. If you don't do the quality and build validation, the technical development efforts are not strong, users are never going to be satisfied. They are going to get false positives, and then you are only going to spend more time rectifying that rather than doing it right first time.
All right, great. So before we conclude the Q&A part of the session, SV, I request you to announce the winner, for which we will reward the Taylor Scholarship as promised before. So if you can see the questions in the Q&A window, the answered part. Or if you remember any questions that you really like, then we can, just announce the winner.
I would probably select Prashant Poladia as the winner for today's Q&A round, because I'm sure Prashant's question had the depth of both the data and the business context, and that's why I think his questions probably are a little more broad-based.
Perfect. Prashant, congratulations on winning the Taylor Scholarship. We'll reach out with you with the reward shortly.
And maybe just before closing, Shama, you want to put the final poll?
Yes, totally. I think it's 100% of yes. I get it now.
Okay, good to know that. Thank you all for really kind of spending the evening. I guess this is indeed an interesting and a very interactive session for me. And thanks Shama and IPL School of Data Science for really having me here today and sharing my thoughts. Definitely enjoyed it. Thank you all.
Likewise, SV, we are grateful that you took the time off and shared your thoughts and knowledge on this subject. And we have enjoyed having you with us. It's been a complete pleasure. Please accept the certificate of appreciation from the Institute. So if you scan the QR code on the certificate, it will take you to a dedicated Hall of Fame page that we have created for you, which will hold the recording of this session. Give it a few hours so we can update the recording.
All right. Sure.
Yes. Thank you once again for sharing your thoughts, and we look forward to future associations with you, SV.
Thank you. Thank you.
And audience, thank you for joining in. Please share your feedback with us. Scan the QR code and let us know. Thank you all for joining us today and look forward to seeing you at the next session. And with that note, I end tonight's session. Happy learning and stay skilled. Have a great night, folks.
Thank you.